All right, so we're diving deep today into Genesis 1:26 to 28.
Yes.
And I know you pastors and Bible study leaders out there, you know this passage. You probably taught it, preached on it, maybe even dreamt about it.
It's one of those core texts,
Yeah.
really foundational.
It is, absolutely. But today we're going beyond the usual Sunday school interpretations, right?
Yeah,
We've got a whole stack of sermons
we do.
on Genesis 1:26 to 28. And we're going to find some hidden gems.
Some golden nuggets.
Yeah. Fresh perspectives, unique illustrations,
Yeah.
the kind of stuff that'll get your congregations going, whoa, okay.
Yeah, to give them something new to think about for their week.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Almost like a master class in sermon prep,
That's right.
seeing how other pastors tackle this passage.
Yeah.
So let's start with dominion and stewardship. I feel like that's always in sermons on these verses.
Always. It's right there.
But instead of the humans or caretakers angle,
Hmm.
some of these sermons took a surprising turn.
Yeah, it's amazing how a simple analogy can just reframe a familiar concept. Like Link UP Church, they talked about, they used a refrigerator
Refrigerator.
as a metaphor for the earth.
Okay, so tell me more about this. I'm very intrigued.
They basically said God gave us this amazing fridge, like fully stocked, everything we need.
Okay.
But just like your fridge at home, it needs to be restocked,
Yeah.
right? You can't just take and take and take, not put anything back in. So they argued that replenishing the earth, that's about more than just environmentalism.
Right.
It's about participating in God's ongoing creative work.
Okay, I like that. So
Yeah.
how does that translate, or how do they connect that back to family and marriage, especially when you're preaching a sermon?
Well, they basically said having children
Mm-hmm.
is a way of restocking the fridge.
Interesting.
So it's about ensuring the continuation of God's creative work. And not just in a physical sense, but in a spiritual sense, too. Like
Yeah.
passing down your faith, passing down your values to the next generation. That's all part of that replenishing.
That's really good. Wow. That is, I like how that connects to something so personal.
Yes.
Like starting a family
It is.
as part of this mandate. It's not just a be fruitful and multiply kind of message.
It's not just a command.
Yeah. There's more to it.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
this responsibility
Exactly. Yeah.
that comes with dominion. And it's not just managing resources, it's investing in the future.
That's good. Yeah. Love that.
So we got dominion as restocking the cosmic refrigerator.
Huh.
I like that. What other interesting interpretations of dominion did you find?
Well, Real Life SC, they took a totally different approach. They tied dominion to this idea of a growth mindset,
Okay.
and they used this story of this Australian businessman, Peter Daniels,
Okay.
and he grew up illiterate,
Wow.
but he ended up becoming super successful.
That's quite a story. But how do they connect that back to Genesis?
Well, their point was that God created us to grow, to learn, to push beyond our limitations. And they tied that back to dominion, saying it's not about exerting power over creation, it's about harnessing our potential to cultivate, to shape the world around us.
So it's less about ruling and more about developing.
Exactly, yeah. It's about taking what God has given us
Yeah.
and using it to make a positive impact, just like Peter Daniels did.
Yeah, I like that.
So yeah, dominion isn't about being passive, it's about actively engaging.
Okay, so that really reframes dominion in a way that maybe resonates more with a modern audience.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so we covered dominion, but Genesis 1:26 to 28 also talks about being made in the image of God.
Yes.
Did any of the sermons offer a fresh perspective on that? I feel like that's a very well-known concept.
Yeah. Menlo Church really dug into the Hebrew understanding of the word image.
Okay.
And their point was that being made in God's image isn't about our physical appearance, it's about our identity as God's children.
That's an important distinction,
Mm.
especially in a culture obsessed with, how we look.
Right, for sure. And they even pushed back against the idea that our bodies are somehow separate or less important than our souls.
Okay.
They actually brought up this quote from Anthony Bourdain. He described the body as a roller coaster, something to be used up and discarded.
That's a pretty bleak perspective.
It is. And they use that to highlight the contrast between a secular worldview and a Christian worldview.
Right.
They emphasize that in the Christian faith, our bodies are part of God's good creation, and they play a crucial role in our eternal destiny.
Wow. Okay. That's a great way to connect the secular source
Yeah.
to a biblical truth.
Totally.
and make people think about, the sanctity of the body.
Yeah.
Did any other sermons have interesting interpretations of made in God's image?
Yes. Door of Hope Christian Church used this intriguing metaphor. They called it angled mirrors.
Angled mirrors, okay.
Yeah, and it's borrowed from N.T. Wright's work. And they suggested we're like mirrors that reflect God's image in two directions.
Okay, how does that work?
So one angle reflects God's image back to him.
Okay,
That's the worship, the adoration part.
okay, yeah.
But the other angle reflects God's image outwards to the world.
So we're reflecting God's love and grace to those around us.
Exactly. It's like we're prisms. We're refracting God's light.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. So it goes beyond just, we're created in his likeness.
It does, yeah.
We also have this role of revealing God to others.
Exactly, exactly. It adds a whole other dimension to what it means to be made in God's image.
It's not just an inward reality, it's an outward expression as well.
Absolutely.
It really does make you think about our impact
Mm.
when we reflect God's character. Now, Genesis 1:26-28
Yeah.
also lays the groundwork for this idea of work,
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
right?
Mm.
Did any of the sermons connect those verses to how we view our vocations?
They did. Christ Fellowship Church actually framed work as a form of worship.
Work as worship.
Mm-hmm.
That's not something you hear every day.
Not every day, no.
So I'd love to hear how they developed that.
So they explored the Hebrew word avoda,
Okay.
which can mean both work and worship.
Interesting.
And they pointed out how in the Old Testament, this word is used in both contexts.
Right.
So it kind of blurs the lines between what we consider sacred and secular.
So they're saying it's not just about, singing hymns on Sunday morning,
Exactly.
but bringing that same reverence and dedication to our everyday work.
That's right. Yeah, they argued that if we view work as an act of service to God, even mundane tasks can become full of meaning and purpose.
I can see how that'd be an encouraging message
Mm.
for people who feel disconnected from their faith, Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
Or, people who maybe don't feel like their work is particularly fulfilling.
Yeah, or maybe they don't like their job.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that every job, no matter how small it seems,
Yeah.
can be an offering to God.
Yeah. And Citizens Church to us actually built on this idea. They emphasized the dignity of work.
Okay.
And they argued that, our worth as image bearers, it doesn't depend on our profession,
Right.
but rather our inherent dignity allows us to approach our work with purpose.
So it's not about finding dignity in what we do,
Mm-hmm.
but bringing our dignity to whatever we do.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Yeah.
They had this fascinating illustration using Dante's Inferno.
Okay.
So there's this soul in heaven
Okay.
who finds deep contentment in this role that they're assigned, even though it might seem kind of insignificant from an earthly perspective.
Okay.
But they find this profound sense of purpose in it.
That's really interesting. It suggests that true fulfillment comes from aligning our work with God's purpose for us,
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
regardless of what our, actual job title is. I
Yeah.
like that. And, it goes back to this idea of dominion. We're called to be co-creators with God, using our gifts and talents to cultivate the world.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So it's like, regardless of if we're building a business,
Yeah.
teaching a classroom,
Yeah.
or taking care of our homes,
Yeah.
we are participating
Absolutely.
in this creative work.
I love that. That's so good. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a powerful way to kind of reframe our understanding of work. It's not just a paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
It's partnering with God
Yeah. Love that.
in his design. And speaking of partners, I'm curious. Genesis 1:26-28 often is at the center of discussions about gender roles and authority.
Mm.
Did any of the sermons address those issues?
Oh, yeah, they did. And there were some really diverse perspectives on this. The Flame Church presented a compelling argument for gender equality
Okay.
that was rooted in the original Hebrew words.
Interesting.
So they focus on these words, radha and eza,
Okay.
which are often translated as dominion and helper, right?
Right.
And those translations, they often lead to this hierarchical view of, male and female roles. But the Flame Church argued that radha, which describes humanity's rule over creation, that applies to both men and women.
Okay.
So God granted equal authority to both from the beginning.
So it's not about men having dominion over women,
No.
but rather they both have dominion
Exactly.
over creation as partners.
Mm-hmm. Together, yeah. And they also challenged that traditional understanding of Aza as implying a subordinate role.
Right, okay.
They pointed out that Aza is used to describe God as a helper to humanity.
That's a good point.
So it doesn't necessarily imply inferiority.
So helper in this context is more like partner or co-laborer.
Right. More like mutual support
Right.
and shared authority.
Okay, that's a refreshing take.
Yeah.
Especially since, these verses are often used to justify traditional gender roles.
Right.
Did any of the sermons address the potential for authority to be misused?
They did. Coastline Bible Church had this very timely sermon called Reclaiming Authority. And they drew a parallel between the story of Ahab in 1 Kings
Okay.
and the mandate given in Genesis.
Right, and Ahab's a classic example of power gone wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Taking Naboth's vineyard
Totally. Yeah.
very unjustly.
And they connected Ahab's actions to how authority can be misused today, whether it's in government or business or even within the church itself.
Right. It's a sobering reminder that true authority comes from God
Yes,
and should be used to serve others, not for personal gain
that's right.
or control.
Yeah.
Did they give any specific examples to illustrate their points?
They did. They quoted David Brooks's book, How to Know a Person,
Okay.
specifically a passage about the dangers of blame shifting and the importance of personal responsibility.
Okay, that's a great example of weaving in a secular insight
Yeah.
to illuminate a biblical principle. We've seen that a few times in this deep dive.
Yeah, for sure.
The Anthony Bourdain quote,
Mm-hmm.
the Dante reference, the Peter Daniels story. I love how, these pastors are incorporating these diverse voices to connect with their congregations.
Absolutely. It makes it so much more engaging and relevant.
Yeah, definitely. It helps bridge the gap between, the ancient world of the Bible and the modern world we live in.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Speaking of connections, I'm curious. Did you notice any recurring themes or underlying messages woven throughout, like something that wasn't explicitly stated in Genesis 1:26-28, but that kind of emerged from these different interpretations?
There was this subtle but powerful theme of reclaiming our God-given authority
Okay.
that ran through a lot of them.
I like that. Can you give me an example of how that played out?
Well, even in the sermons that focused on stewardship, there was this underlying sense that we've been entrusted with something really precious and powerful.
Right.
And it wasn't just about taking care of the earth, but actively engaging with it, shaping it, transforming it for God's glory.
So it's like we've been given this incredible inheritance, but somewhere along the way, we forgot what we had
Yeah,
or allowed others to kind of define us
absolutely.
instead of claiming our true identity
Yeah.
as image bearers.
Yeah, and that's where this idea of reclaiming comes in.
Right.
It's about stepping into those roles as co-creators, embracing our gifts,
Yes.
and not letting fear or insecurity hold us back.
That's a great message. I feel like a lot of people need to hear that today. Not just pastors.
For sure, yeah.
It's about taking ownership of who God created us to be
Mm-hmm.
and living out our purpose boldly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And that theme of reclaiming also came through in those sermons that focused on identity,
Yes.
right? They were challenging people to reject the lies that the world tells us
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
about ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and to walk in that fullness of our potential.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like we've been given the keys to the kingdom, but we're too afraid to use them.
Right. It's time to step up and claim our place.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about how these sermons connect to our lives today,
Yeah.
but I'm curious, did you notice any connections to other parts of Scripture that might shed some light on Genesis 1:26-28?
Yes. A few of them drew some really interesting parallels. Menlo Church, for example, they referenced Romans 12.1,
Okay.
where Paul talks about offering your body as a living sacrifice.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Right.
How'd they tie that back?
Well, they used that to reinforce their point about the body being part of God's eternal plan for us.
Okay.
So if we're called to offer our bodies as sacrifices, well, our bodies must be sacred
Right.
and worthy of offering.
So it's not about neglecting the body or punishing the body.
Mm-hmm.
It's recognizing it as a gift
That's right.
to be stewarded
Yeah,
and used for God's glory.
exactly. Yeah. And it all goes back to being made in God's image.
Right.
Right. If our bodies are part of what makes us image bearers, well, we need to view them with reverence and respect.
That's such an important message,
Yeah,
especially in a culture that often objectifies and exploits the body.
it does. Yeah.
That connection to Romans, also
Yeah.
reinforces that concept of worship we talked about.
Yes, for sure.
If offering our bodies is an act of worship,
Mhm.
well, then it follows that everything we do with our bodies can be an act of worship.
Absolutely, yeah.
So our work, our relationships, even just, the care of our physical bodies
Mm-hmm.
can be an expression of our love for God.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Another interesting cross-reference came from Door of Hope Christian Church. They connected Genesis 1:26 to 28 to the royal priesthood,
Oh, yeah.
found in Exodus 19 and 1 Peter 2.
Yes, love it.
Now, that might be a new concept for some people.
Yeah.
Can you unpack that a little bit?
Sure. So in the Old Testament, the priests acted as mediators between God and the people. They offered sacrifices, interceded in prayer, and represented God to the nation. But in the New Testament, Peter tells us that all believers are now part of a royal priesthood.
So we don't need a special class of priests anymore to act as go-betweens.
That's right. Yeah. We all have direct access to God through Christ.
Right.
And so Door of Hope connected this to Genesis by saying, we're all called to be these mediators, right?
Yeah.
Reflecting God's love and glory to the world.
So it's not just about personal salvation.
Mm-hmm.
It's about representing God's kingdom
That's right.
and bringing his presence into every area of life.
Yeah.
That's a big responsibility.
It is, but it's a privilege too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it reminds us that our faith is not just a private thing. It's about joining God's mission
Right.
to redeem the world.
And that mission starts with who we are,
Mm-hmm.
claiming our authority, and stepping into that calling
Yeah.
as image bearers and co-creators.
Love it. Yeah.
That's a message that's all over the Bible.
It is, yeah.
Mhm.
Genesis lays the foundation for this whole story of redemption and restoration.
It's really amazing how much depth we can find just in a few verses,
Mhm.
when we really take the time to dig deep. We've covered a lot of ground today. Dominion as restocking the fridge. Work as an act of worship.
Yeah.
We've explored what it means to be made in God's image and how that image is reflected back to God, but also out into the world.
Yeah.
We've talked about reclaiming our authority and living out our purpose with boldness and confidence.
Yeah. It's incredible.
And it's, even though all these sermons were based on the same verses, Genesis 1:26 to 28,
Yeah.
they offered such a diverse range of perspectives and applications.
Right.
And that's what I love about studying Scripture. There's always more to uncover, always something new to learn.
Always.
And I bet our listeners are thinking, how can I use this? How can I apply these insights
Absolutely. I hope so.
in their own sermons and lessons?
Yeah, because ultimately these deep dives, they're not just about information.
Right.
They're about sparking that creativity
Yeah.
and inspiring us to engage with Scripture in new ways.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, what would you say is the most important takeaway from this deep dive? What do you hope people remember?
I think the biggest takeaway is that Genesis 1:26 to 28, it's not just some historical account or theological concept.
Right.
It's a call to action. It's a call to embrace who we are as image bearers,
Yeah.
to claim our authority,
Yeah.
and to use that authority to make a real difference.
And as we've seen, that call to action can take so many forms.
Yeah.
It could be leading our families, serving our communities, using our skills to create, to bring order, to cultivate, a flourishing world.
Exactly, yeah. And it's not about waiting for some big, grand opportunity to make a difference. It's
Yeah.
about the everyday moments, the ordinary things, the relationships.
It's recognizing that every aspect of our lives, from our work to how we treat each other,
Yes.
it's a chance to reflect God's image and to advance his kingdom.
Yeah, I love that.
So for all you pastors and Bible study leaders listening, I hope this has given you some fresh perspectives on Genesis 1:26 to 28 and sparked some new ideas for your sermons and lessons.
Me too.
And maybe, inspired you to deliver a message that'll get people thinking in new ways.
That's right. And as you keep meditating on this passage, I just want to leave you with this thought-provoking question. From Door of Hope Christian Church. If we are angled mirrors, reflecting God's love back to him and out into the world, what does that look like in our digital age? A world that's so saturated with online personas, with digital reflections.
That is a great question
Mm-hmm.
and a really challenging one. It makes us think about how we're representing ourselves, but ultimately how we're representing God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there are no easy answers, but it's a question that's worth wrestling with.
Absolutely, yeah.
It can lead to some important conversations and really profound insights.
So to all our listeners, keep exploring, keep digging deeper, keep seeking fresh perspectives, and keep reflecting God's love.
Yes. in everything you do.
Online and offline.
Couldn't have said it better myself.